What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel. I haven't gotten an opportunity to talk about the tragic events that happened in Spain with the passing of Diogo Jota and Andre Silva, and also wanted to take a few days to process that personally and get some thoughts together. And as the memorial service was held this weekend, you saw tributes in a variety of different forms, from goal celebrations to social media posts. You had some of Jota's former teammates playing in the Club World Cup and obviously having this weigh on them. So I do want to start this by spending a couple minutes talking about the tragic event that happened and what we've seen in the few days since. And the main thing I keep coming back to is, of course, this is first and foremost about Jota and Silva's family, all the people who love them, the 3 children Jota left behind, all of the experiences he's never going to get with his family moving forward. All of that is first and foremost. There is a second part of this too that is really what has struck me in all of the tributes and all of the memories and the emotion and the processing of this awful event, which is, it feels like the kind of the legacy that Jota left and the way people are remembering him isn't anything new. It was very clear in the way he lived his life. All of these things that are being said by the people who knew him best. And to me, that's one of the greatest compliments you can give somebody in terms of the person they were and how they lived. And what I mean by that is, you could see his enthusiasm for life. It seemed like he always had a smile on his face. He was celebrating with people, interacting with people, joking around. You could see that. You could see the determination, the grit with which he played. You could see this idea that his career was not handed to him, as ridiculously talented as he was, that he had to fight, scratch, and claw to get these opportunities, and that he was not taking them for granted. You could see that every time he took the field. There were multiple conversations that I either listened to or was a part of. Wolves fans, Liverpool fans, and not this weekend or since this has happened, but in previous months and years, where people who watch him consistently, week in and week out, in different ways emphasize this idea of people don't understand how good this guy is. And so when you hear all of these touching tributes and what he meant to so many people, to me it speaks so many volumes, and it's all you need to know about him as a person first and foremost, and a player. That it seems like all of this stuff was kind of already there, and obviously it takes a tragic event like this for everybody to focus and give him the respect and show love to him and Andre Silva and the family. But it just didn't feel like any of this was new. And like I said, that to me, that is one of the highest compliments you can pay somebody. That he lived his life in a way that showed what he was about. And obviously, it's absolutely awful. This was supposed to be, the best summer of his life. In many ways, it was the culmination of everything he had been working toward his entire life, professionally and personally. Celebrating becoming a Premier League champion, Nations League champion, and most importantly, just getting married to his childhood sweetheart. just like that, it's gone. His brother's gone. Parents have to bury 2 children. And there isn't that much I can add to this conversation. And I think I'm a person who processes by wanting to talk about things. Other people want to kind of process individually. Everybody's going through their own different journey with this, and that's perfectly fine. But I did want to take a couple minutes to share some thoughts and try and add a little something to this conversation and celebrate the person and player that Diogo Jota was, the person and player that Andre Silva was, and recognize the importance of everybody joining together in this incredibly sad time to pay tribute them and support everybody who loved them in the best way possible. So awful news. Condolences to family, loved ones, friends, the Liverpool community, and you try and make sense of it, and sometimes in situations like this it doesn't make sense. It's incredibly cruel, incredibly unfair, and everyone's just trying to figure out how to move forward from it. The other big event, pretty busy weekend overall, but the other big event I'm going to spend some time on, Mexico comes from behind to defeat the U.S. in the Gold Cup final. This is ultimately the result you expected. Mexico controlled the game, didn't dominate it in the sense of creating all of these clear-cut chances where it should have been 5-1 or something like that, but certainly were the team dictating the terms of the game, dominating the ball, imposing their will on the U.S., which you look at these rosters, you look at how the tournament's gone, that was to be expected. U.S. goes ahead, set piece Chris Richards' goal, and then it's Raul Jimenez, Edson Alvarez, who get Mexico back in the game, and then ultimately get the winning goal to give Mexico another Gold Cup victory. My big takeaway from this tournament from a U.S. men's national team standpoint is that I do feel like this team gave people something to believe in, which is really important heading into next summer when people need a reason to tune in to a team that is not expected to go be a contender to win that tournament, right? It's different on the women's side. People care about the U.S. women's national team in major tournaments because they know every single time they go in having an opportunity to win. That's not the case here. Maybe something miraculous happens and all of a sudden they find themselves in the semifinals. But you need to get the excitement to grab people's attention. And it has been a complete downward trajectory. I've talked about that over and over again. But at least this team put together some wins, got to a final, and just gave a different vibe and a different energy, a much more positive one than what had been going on and was going on even before this tournament started with the Pulisic stuff, with the friendlies. They did ultimately turn it into something I would argue you can feel pretty good about. And specifically, Chris Richards, really, really good tournament. Malik Tillman, not as great in the later stages of the tournament, but overall very good tournament. Strong case that he should be starting at the World Cup. And Diego Luna, very impressive tournament. Those 3 guys in particular. And with Luna and Tillman, it's not just the goals they produced, the really good moments they had, the quality they displayed. It's also the work rate on the defensive end. It's the hustle plays that Luna continued to make from the very beginning to the way he got the U.S. to the final by getting to a ball it probably had no business getting to open the scoring. It's the tracking back of Malik Tillman, the tackles, continuing to be fouled and continuing to get up and get on with the game. That stuff matters. And so this team had much more of the prototypical U.S. men's national team DNA. And if you're looking for something to latch on to as a fan of this team, they gave you something. The question moving forward becomes, how much does that actually matter, and how much does Mauricio Pochettino care going into next summer? That next roster is going to be fascinating because, again, this team will not play another competitive game until it takes the field at the World Cup. So these friendlies, late 2025, early 2026, matter a whole lot. Who's on those rosters, who's starting games, who the goalkeeper is, all that stuff. That's going to tell us where these guys really stand in his mind. Because ultimately, I think what you got here was a team that basically did what it was supposed to. You feel like you got everything you could out of it. And they just didn't have the same talent level as Mexico, and I would argue Canada in this tournament as well. You catch a break with Canada getting eliminated in the penalty shootout. You don't handle Guatemala the way ideally you would, but you get the job done. You get to the final. You give yourself an opportunity. You don't get played off the field or anything like that. You basically feel like they maxed out their potential, which is really all you can ask for. Clearly, that's not good enough to get the U.S. where the U.S. expects to be at the World Cup. Obviously, it's also not going to be this group of players trying to do that. The question becomes, how much does Poch weigh the things that he really likes about this group of players and the positive things that came out of this tournament? A guy like Diego Luna versus the quality and the overall talent level of the guys who weren't there, who are playing at the highest level in Europe. That's the million-dollar question moving forward. We're not going to know that answer until September, and we're really not going to know that answer until the World Cup squad is released. But overall, if you take out the friendlies and you just look at where this team was heading into the tournament and where this team is now, you have to feel much better. You have to feel good. This was a feel-good team that gave you feel-good moments, even though it was outside the Trinidad and Tobago game. It was never particularly pretty. It was never particularly impressive. It was harder than it needed to be. At the same time, Canada lost to Guatemala. The U.S. found a way to win that game. Nobody had scored on Mexico since the opening game of the tournament. Chris Richards got a goal. Gave the U.S. a chance. Of course you want to win the tournament. But there was so much negativity and so many players missing that this was not a win or bust situation. As much as the overall stature of the teams kind of lends itself to that. I do think overall this was a major step in the right direction for Pochettino. That he has to feel good about what this team did. How much does that matter going into next summer? I honestly don't know. My initial off the bat thought is not all that much. I do think it matters in the sense of getting people to at least buy in and feel like, okay, maybe this team's starting to turn things around. But you still have the same questions about the players who are probably going to be on the field at the World Cup. And if Pochettino leans into these guys who just played at the Gold Cup, you have the other question, which is this team good enough? Because they did nothing to suggest that this group of players is good enough to go make the quarterfinals of a World Cup. You feel like the quote-unquote best 11 is good enough to potentially get to a quarterfinal, at least a round of 16. Give themselves an opportunity to get to a quarterfinal. The question is, can they deliver on what they're capable of? Because they haven't done that for a couple years now. So either way, you're coming in with a major question that cannot be answered by this tournament because the best players on this team, by and large, chose not to participate or could not participate in this tournament. So that was never going to get solved here. So just taking this in the vacuum of what it was in these players in this competition, they had a good showing. They handled themselves in the way that everybody has been crying out for this team to handle itself and to behave with that tough, gritty, go chase down all the loose balls, win the hustle, 50-50s, all that kind of stuff. You saw that from this group. That was the biggest thing they could contribute, and that is what they delivered you. Would have been great had they found a way to win the tournament too. You're probably starting to ask some harder questions if you're Pochettino then. But at no point did they look convincing in here where you really felt that this is the best iteration of this team that the U.S. can send forward next summer. Nobody expected that conversation to be taking place. That's why it was so important for the best players to be at this tournament. So going off of what we have, I do think it was clear net positive. The other thing I wanted to mention real quickly here before I get out of here, England women lose opener in the Euros to France. And I only bring this up because of what happens next. Game number 2 for the Lionesses is against the Netherlands. Unless they get really fortunate, if they lose that game, they are almost 100% going home. If they win that game, they still have a very, very, very good chance of going through. If they draw, they've got a chance. Depending on how things go, that'll determine how good of a chance. But the reality of having those 3 teams in a group was that one of them was going to have to play the other 2 first, and that was going to set the stage for this group. It just so happened that an England team with a new goalkeeper, new players playing more important roles, a loss of some veterans, I talked about that in my preview for this tournament, had to go play France first, did not play well, came pretty close to getting back into the game and snatching a point at the end that would have done wonders for their chances of staying in this tournament. And now you have to play the Netherlands. It's just a confluence of unfortunate circumstances that got thrown England's way. And so the question now becomes, can they deal with it? You got to find a way to at least get a draw. Unless you're going to get some real help, I kind of feel like that you got to treat this as a must-win. But if you smash Wales 7-0 or something like that in Game 3, a draw might be enough. But I wanted to at least discuss that for a moment, acknowledge that happens, the biggest development of the Euros so far from a on-field results standpoint. And, of course, this is one of your favorites, defending champions. You're not used to talking about England being in danger of not getting to the knockout stage of tournaments. And we are not there yet, let's be very clear. Because they will be in great position if they beat the Netherlands. But if they lose that game, we could very well be talking about them being eliminated before they even get to the 3rd game of the group stage. So, keep your eye on what happens in that group. And as the Euros continue here, that is all for this edition of the Weekend Roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.